Muy buenos días, muy buenas tardes
Good
para todas,
morning,
para todos.
good afternoon, everybody. I hope that you are all very well. Welcome to the regional webinar of the Pan American Health Organization on the alcohol sponsorships in sports implications for public health in the Americas. I'm Hernando Garcia, and I'm an international consultant on alcohol and psychoactive substances of the Pan American Health Organization. And before we start, we want to remind each and every one of you that this webinar it has a simultaneous interpretation into Spanish, English, and Portuguese. In addition, it is important to recall that this session is being recorded so that it can be subsequently be consulted by you as a support material and to share it with whoever may be interested in this topic. Before we start, we also want to thank the participation of the Ministry of Health, Sports, Academy, Tahoe country offices, and obviously and each and every one of you attendees for joining us today. This webinar is a part of a number of webinar of the safety strategy organized by the Pan American Health Organization and the WHO. And this is an initiative that aims at strengthening policies and strategies to reduce the damage caused by alcohol. At this time, the webinar will focus on one of the most important or relevant challenges for public health. That's alcohol sponsorship in sports, and obviously the exposure of the populations that are vulnerable, like children and adolescents. And to officially start this webinar and to share the objectives of this space, we will invite Raul Martin del Campo, International Advisor for alcohol and psychoactive substances of the Pan American Health Organization. Thank you very much, Leo. Good morning and good afternoon, everybody. It is really a pleasure to welcome you to this regional webinar on alcohol sponsorships in sports implications for public health in the Americas. This is an urgent and very relevant conversation for our region, and for this reason, PAHO wants to sensitize those responsible for public health and civil society and society at large on the importance of regulating advertising, promotion, and sponsorship of alcoholic beverages, whose damages have a general impact on public health and are related to over 200 diseases, including cancer, accidents, and also has an impact on productivity and social performance and child development. And sports, paradoxically, stands for well-being, and it is one of the most positive expressions of our societies. But precisely because of its huge capacity on the emotional side, it has become recently an extraordinarily powerful vehicle to promote alcohol. This is not a natural relationship, but rather a gadget created by the alcohol industry. At the Pan American Health Organization, we do not tackle public policy on health issues only from the individual viewpoint or health services, but we also incorporate the commercial determinants, the promotion and integration of an approach of commercial determinants in alcohols are learned, and they are learned by creating expectations on the conditions. When a child sees in their favorite sports or an admired sports person, and in that scenario, they see constantly a alcohol brand. They are learning also that alcohol is part of the celebration that is related to identity, belonging, on a normal basis. And for those who are exposed to alcohol for the first time, the children actually have expectations that have been formed through many years of exposure to alcohol and that they've tasted. They will belong to a group of friends, they will enjoy acceptance, and they will become adults and will be attractive to others. Thanks to advertising and sponsorship from a very early age, children recognize alcoholic beverages brands and identify those brands that sponsor their favorite teams and identify with them. We are concerned that the local pressure on alcohol also has an impact on other vulnerable groups like the general population, but also teetotalers, women, former drinkers that are trying to stop drinking alcohol. And I see here in this chat that there are many addictions advisors and counselors, and we ask them also to disseminate this message. We want to particularly welcome the parents who are here with us today because we are imminent of one of the most important sports events in the planet, the World Soccer Cup, and that means broadcasts, campaigns in the social media and digital means and advertising. What can families do in this respect? They play a key role because they can help to break the automatic relationship between sports and alcohol. And the parents can be a good example of a family entertainment with alcohol and to make the children understand that beer is not a refreshing drink but alcoholic. And to help them, you can visit our PAHO webpage to guide them in a worthy conversation with the children. Also to help children to understand that behind the advertising messages, there is an effort to influence their decisions in favor of the industry's commercial interests. At PAHO, we also foster the implementation of the safer package for alcohol from 2022 to 2030 that include advertising, sponsorship, restrictions as significant measures. Why? Because many countries also limit advertising of alcohol in certain spaces and time slots. But to which children do not have access to, but the great exceptions are sports events. So the message today is clear: to reduce the exposure of children, in particular, the population in general, children and adolescents in the sports, to prevent the normalization of consumption and to promote long-term health and well-being. We must place their health above a commercial interest. We cannot promote sports as a way to accomplish healthy lifestyles and at the same time allow those environments to normalize consumption of a product that clearly damages health. Today we will listen to renowned international experts and see the experience of one of the countries and regions that has made most progress in this agenda. We will also discuss the no and low alcohol beverages and the promotion of alcohol sponsorship and advertising, and to mobilize countries to effectively support these public health issues. Thank you very much, Raul, for those words and for providing a context to this important debate. And to move forward, I would quickly like to share with you the agenda for our meeting. In the first part, we will have a presentation of the regional condition of alcohol health in the Americas, and then we will specifically focus on alcohol sponsorship in sports from this perspective. In the first part, we will review science-based evidence, public health strategies, marketing strategies, and we will learn about the experience in Costa Rica's Ministry of Health and civil society. And finally, we will close with a brief debate panel involving the participants in this webinar. And to start with this section, we will learn the report about the condition of alcohol and health that has just been published, and this will provide a context of the size of the impact of alcohol on public health. We're now going to invite again Raul del Campo, who will be sharing with us this report. Raul, over to you. Thank you very much. If you will allow me. Yes, okay, great. Yes, I'm pleased to have attendees from across the region. Welcome everybody, and also from other regions that are also accompanying us. Welcome to you also. We want to share with you the regional report on health in the Americas that we have just launched. We're going to share with you the QR code so that you can download it. And with this report, we want also to share with you a regional diagnosis and for each of the countries of the region about the health damages that are resulting from alcohol consumption. This report is based on WHO report and the global report, and provides information to implement this action plan and to adopt policies, in particular the safer technical package. In terms of it also includes national health and alcohol consumption surveys and population demographics from the United Nations and study on the world load on mobility. We have information for the 35 countries in the Americas. We have here per capita global consumption that is used to compare alcohol consumption across countries around the world. This measure is derived from recorded alcohol sales in various countries in liters divided by the number of people older than 15 years. This allows comparisons among countries. You see here a graph that shows the various regions across the world: Africa, the Americas, Europe, the Middle East, South Asia, and South Pacific and the regions. And the consumption of alcohol, perhaps for the all regions, is about 7.4 liters alcohol a year. And we rank here as the second highest alcohol per capita consumption around the world. Europe is the country, region with the highest region, but Europe, in most of the European countries, are what we call a wet culture. They have the habit of drinking alcohol with their meals. Not so in the Americas. What we will see is that what accounts for this kind of a very high per capita alcohol consumption in the Americas has to do with the alcohol abuse, which entails a certain short and long-term health problems, specific problems. Also, we consider non-recorded alcohol and estimate of alcohol consumption that is not registered and that is deducted from also the consumption by tourists as a floating population. If we divided these alcohol liters by the population, we would have about 12 liters per capita consumption. This report also shows specific data for each of the 35 countries across the region, and it shows that several of these countries are well above the regional and world levels.
Son de las subregiones de América del Norte y del Caribe. Tenemos también la prevalencia de población bebedora, que es decir, las personas.
In particular, North America and the Caribbean countries. There are also countries that have been drinking alcohol in the last year. 60% of the population, 68% of male and 52% of women have consumed alcohol in the last year. And we have a significant number of non-drinkers, but alcohol consumption also involves potential risks for health. And also another issue of concern is consumption by minors, which is not admissible because laws across the region forbid the sale of alcohol to minors. It's illegal. But 42% of minors in our regions are presently drinkers, 47% of male teenagers and 40% of female teenagers. And if you look at the gap between male and women among our teenagers, is much lower than among the general population. So there is much work to be done in respect of prevention and surveillance of laws that prevent minors to have access to alcohol. In terms of excess alcohol consumption, it is important to say that figure out how many people consume 5 or 6 drinks in one single session. That's about one-fourth of the population that has this, that engages in this excess alcohol. 36% of men and 6% of women. And when we divide this into the number of drinkers and compare it to other regions around the world, we come out as the second highest consumption regions, where male drinkers, 50% of them drink and consume excess amounts of alcohol. It seems that in our culture aims at getting drunk, and this has to do with violence and the risk of accidents, etc. And another important piece of data is that in the case of excess population consumption among women, we rank first. The Americas rank first. It has the highest prevalence of about 30% of women who drink do so and abuse alcohol consumption. Also, this calculation is made also in relation with healthier years of life, and this shows that about 7% of premature deaths could be prevented if the consumption of alcohol were reduced. So the main causes associated with this disabilities and premature deaths are liver cirrhosis, digestive tract disease, pancreatitis, and different types of cancers, accidents, and violence and falls. Also, when talking about mortality, also, we see that several of these conditions that I just mentioned are also the reason behind the high mortality throughout the region. Another important thing to be borne in mind is that for the age group in the Americans between 20 and 39 years of age, about 30% of deaths are related to alcohol consumption. Consequently, we have to focus our efforts not only on children and adolescents, but also young adults and women. And this shows that every year in the Americas, 380,000 people, almost 400,000 people die across the Americas because of alcohol-related causes and the related conditions. The prevalence of disabilities because of the consumption of alcohol, according to the international classification, include toxic consumption, which has to do with the fact that also the person does not present this stage, physical dependence or the physical impact of it. They do have a problem of consumption in their families, at work, risky consumption, making risky conditions like driving or engaging in risk sexual practices. And of course, all this becomes a issue for individuals. About 10% of the prevalence of these conditions, 1 out of 10 every person has problems because of the type of alcohol consumption, and resulting in physical dependence, in intolerance due to withdrawal symptoms and compulsive behavior to drink that covers about 5% of the population in the Americas. 1 out of 20 persons in the show
Este informe también incluye las respuestas
conditions related to alcohol consumption. And these reports also include responses to the international commitments included in the Sustainable Development Objectives of the Global Alcohol Plan. And what this shows is that our colleagues at WHO have identified that about only 1/4 of the population have a specific government agency that is specifically responsible for looking into problems related to alcohol abuse, or a written policy that is applicable in these countries. Only about 1/3 of the countries in the world have clinical guidelines for their countries. For 43% of countries report that they do have specialized services for these kinds of issues, but as this shows, the quick intervention programs, there is still a large gap that has to be filled to improve access to treatment services. This is a measure that talks about the availability of these services, that is, whether the services exist, but we still need to see access to these services, and this means that we realize that most services are concentrated in the country's largest cities. We also have a measurement of the availability of pharmacological treatments that has to do with the fact that the countries procure the medications that are required, and that include in their essential medications drugs list. But we should also have to value how accessible this pharmacological treatment is for the people. So as a conclusion of the report, we see that alcohol is a very important vector for morbidity and mortality in the Americas. We still have significant gaps to fill to accomplish our objectives, like the Sustainable Development Agenda, and the implementation of the Safer Technical Package is still important, and includes the best practices to tackle this issue. We need to strengthen the health services, and we also need these policies to cut across the sectors, not just the health, but it should also involve education, justice, and social assistance that will be sustainable over time, not just a short term, and that focus on public health beyond the stigmatization and the punishment for showing these kinds of conditions. This is the overall regional scenario, and precisely on this basis is what we need to reinforce these policy packages, and we will be talking about the restriction of sponsorship of alcohol, in particular in sports events.
Muchas gracias a ti, Raúl, por la presentación y por ayudarnos a comprender muchísimo mejor cómo se da el fenómeno del uso.
Thank you very much for helping us to learn the impact of alcohol and public health across the regions. There are several questions.
En este momento, qué bueno. Y hay una pregunta que estaba allí saliendo de manera constante, porque obviamente los datos son muy interesantes.
There is a repeat questions in the chat box and about the data. You can write in your web search the report on the situation of alcohol and health in the Americas, and that is the QR code that you can scan to download this report. And
escuchando, observando, puedan ir descargando el informe y enterarse un poco más de todo lo que está allí presentado. Y bueno, continuando con la agenda, yo creo que vamos a entrar en el tema central de este webinar, y es precisamente hablar del patrocinio del alcohol en el deporte y sus implicaciones en la salud pública. Para esto vamos a tener a continuación una presentación especial pregrabada del doctor Richard Purves, ¿sí? Él es Senior Research Fellow del Institute for Social Marketing and Health de la Universidad de Sterling. Él es reconocido internacionalmente por su trabajo en marketing del alcohol, patrocinio deportivo y regulación de la publicidad. Richard ha colaborado ampliamente en investigaciones sobre exposición al marketing del alcohol, patrocinio deportivo, estrategias de marketing, aportando evidencia clave sobre cómo estas prácticas han
About
influido
all these
positivamente
practices,
en la
with all these
economía, la
practices
opinión
that
y el
have an
desempeño de las
influence on
empresas.
children and
Agradecemos
teenagers.
especialmente la
We
participación del Dr. Richard y su
thank
disposición para
Dr.
contribuir con esta
Richard for
conversación
his
regional.
presentation and for his
El video va a estar en
collaboration with this
completamente en
regional
inglés. Podemos
research.
cambiar
And the
el
audio will
canal
be in
a su
English. You
idioma
can
de su
change your
preferencia.
channel
Entonces,
to the
me
language of
pidió
your
compartir
preference.
el video
And
pregrabado que nos ha enviado el Dr. Richard.
so we will share his presentation.
No hay audio del video.
Permítanos un segundo que el audio nos estaba escuchando, ya lo vamos a compartir. Permítanos un momento, vamos a compartir el audio del video, por favor.
Please give us a moment. We will share the audio of this presentation as soon as we can.
Bueno, en este momento presentamos un problema técnico con el audio del video. Yo creo
We have a
que
technical
podemos
problem with
avanzar
the audio of this video,
darle
so
más
maybe
tiempo
until we
la
solve this
presentación
problem,
de la
we
doctora
can
Angélica María
continue
Claro, quien
with
nos estará
the
acompañando
presentation of
en la
Dr.
jornada del
Ana
día de
María
hoy.
Claro,
La
who
doctora
is with
Angélica
us
María
today.
Claro es
Angélica
psicóloga,
María Claro is a
ella es doctora
psychologist,
en salud
and
pública
she's
y
a
trabaja
doctor
para la Organización
in
Internacional.
public
Doctora
health,
Angélica
a
María,
PhD in
bienvenida a esta
public
plataforma.
health, and
Pues
welcome.
muy buenos
We
días.
will
No
welcome
esperaba
her.
yo ser la
Well,
primera que
thank you
habla
very
porque
much.
esta
It wasn't
presentación
my
de
idea to
Richard
be the
era
first one
buenísima y de hecho nos
to,
complementamos muy bien.
well,
Realmente nos vamos
to
a acomodar.
speak today, but
Espero
well,
que mi
mine
presentación sí esté
supplements
funcionando
the
bien.
first presentation, so I
Perfecto,
hope
gracias por asentir.
my
Entonces,
presentation is working
empecemos.
well.
De verdad,
Well,
muchísimas gracias por este espacio y yo
thank you
quiero
very
empezar
much for
contándoles
this
algo
space,
que
and
me
I would
pasó
like to
realmente hace unas
start
semanas y que
sharing
me
something that
recordó
really
por qué
happened a
esto que
few
estamos
weeks
hablando
ago,
hoy es en
and
serio tan
that will
importante.
show
Y es que
us
estaba dando una
why
entrevista de
this is
radio aquí en
this issue
Colombia
for today is so important,
hablando sobre los
and
daños
that's
del alcohol
because
y los
in
efectos
Colombia
que puede
we're
dar.
talking
Y un
about
señor
the
se
effects of
comunicó desde la
alcohol,
ciudad
and
diferente a Bogotá y me dijo que estaba muy
a
preocupado por
person
lo que yo estaba
communicated from
compartiendo or contact us from Bogota, and he said that we should promote we should promote the restraint of alcoholic beverages in during or especially for youngsters, for teenagers, because sport event that should inspire health and well-being, that is positive things, is really exploited by the alcohol industry to reach out to teenagers and even children, and promoting thereby a habit that is very very negative. And we are today here because we share we all share the idea that we have to protect girls, boys, and teenagers because they deserve to grow free of the commercial pressure of the marketing pressure to consume alcohol. And what is happening with the World Cup, Soccer World Cup 2026? Right now, this event seems to be one of the most seen by about 6,000 million people. There's 600 billion people. And if we look at this proportionally and how many children and teenagers are in the world, that means that about 1,400 or to 1,700 million girls, boys, and teenagers will be part of the audience of this World Cup. And the industry is really profiting from this situation. And Movendi International, about what in a documentary about what the industry is doing in the Americas, and the strategy is in a combined strategy with a basic principle that it is to invade all possible spaces. Mexico, which is the host country, shows that the Modelo Group is giving away tickets for the different games, and this is this is very important because they are even providing refrigerators, and they are they are targeting restaurants and taverns where whole families will be watching the games. And these refrigerators and TVs will stay in the restaurant. So they are looking for a favorable position of their brand through these type of strategies. And so the restaurants will have the necessary means to provide free or provide alcoholic beverages for a long time. And they are saying that they will do and also Brahma it will do the same thing in all in arena number 1 to the five big cities of Brazil. And Brazil is one of the most is a country where soccer is a really important issue. And Brahma says, well, we of course have to follow the FIFA procedures, but they have also their own rules, and they are installing or providing free beers in many cities, or almost free beers. And in Colombia, Zenit and Águila beer brands are also activating their campaigns much sooner than the initial games of this World Cup, and they are even appearing in movie halls, movies, and cinemas, and not only in cinemas but also in national TV chains, in regional TV chains, and the campaign had reached more than 20 million people during the first 24 hours, and it went beyond 10 million visualizations. And this has reached out to Colombians in general, including children. And they are using important media figures in order to promote their brand. Well, this seems to be the same policy in Mexico, in Brazil, and in Colombia, but it's one company only. It's the same company for three different regions with one strategy and one headquarters. So this invasion of all possible scenarios is also accompanied by messages that are introduced to the audience while they are well, promoting their products. The first one is to position the industry saying that they facilitate collective celebrations and the national pride, feeling of pride. In Argentina, for example, they they are promoting a campaign with hearts about hearts and brains, believing in their proficiency, and they have campaigns such as they have campaigns that are centered not on the product but on national pride. And the other thing they are doing is they are featuring their support to small businesses and local economy. They act as allies of small business and the local economy. And this means that this is part of the foundations of marketing. It's called commercial promotion. And so they sell a lot of products because they have turned the restaurants and stores and shops into allies, and they are defending the interests of the big industry of alcohol, of liquor, and well, this has an impact on public health because what is happening now, that is to defend a policy what is happening with this is that promoting a policy that protects the health of the population will be more difficult because this industry is expanding its sales and it is also expanding the support it receives for selling alcohol products. And the third one is something we have heard a lot about, and the industry focuses on soccer World Cups as allies of public health about the promotion with the promotion of responsible consumption. And they say that the whole operation is focused on responsible consumption, and this is a real win-win situation because the products are not the problem. The problem are the people that do not know how to use these responsible, but they really figure as a good party, as well, as the champions of health, and they also show they show their image as, or they turn their image into allies of the government because they really promote the national industry, and they say that the president, well, the president himself or presidents are promoting responsible consumption. And the last thing I want to say is that what the industry is doing to do advertising of products without alcohol, this shows us what is hauthappening to the funds in Mexico, where public health where public health authorities had achieved a ban on alcohol products or products also without alcohol or with a low alcoholic content, but of the same brand. So they are going against brands and not against specific products, and that's the best way. And there were other scenarios where they were protected because they turned the opportunity of big sports championships into an opportunity for increasing their sales. And the zero alcohol doesn't mean zero publicity, because publicity it means publicity or advertising without restrictions, because they are advertising their non-alcoholic beverages, but they are also advertising their brand, which also sells alcoholic products. It might sound responsible and public health benefiting public health, but this only helps them to expand their business and generate new opportunities and more consumption. And they are competing with coffee and water and tea. And what I want to finish with a positive note, and we know the solution, what the solution is. We know what we have to do in order to protect the young and the teenagers from these or from the disadvantages of alcohol consumption. And governments have to support us in that, but also the civil society and the academia. Although, well, I was interviewed by media, and they say that, and they told me, well, sports are a way of celebrating something as a family or as a society, but we should have public policies such to promote celebration, but without alcohol. And these public policies have a huge influence. Thank you, Angélica, for this presentation and for allowing us to understand this context, because it's precisely these strategies that we are also promoting, because it's very important to know about the impact on public health. So we'll continue with Dr. Richard, and you can ask your questions in the meantime, and also, well, further on, we will answer these questions and remarks.
And thank you for joining us today. I'm sorry I'm not able to join you in person, but I'm very grateful for the opportunity to record this presentation. I'd like to thank PAHO and OPS for inviting me to speak today, and for all their help setting this up. Today I'm going to speak about alcohol sponsorship in sports, and I'm going to focus on the evidence and public health implications. So before we begin, let me briefly introduce myself. My name is Richard Purvis. I am a public health researcher at the Institute for Social Marketing and Health at the University of Stirling, where my work focuses on alcohol marketing, sports sponsorship, youth exposure to advertising, and the wider commercial determinants of health. Much of my research examines how alcohol companies promote their products across sporting environments, television broadcasts, social media, packaging, and digital platforms, and how these marketing strategies shape attitudes and behaviours, particularly among children and young people. And a disclaimer before we start. A few of the images used throughout this presentation have been generated using AI, although the examples that I show of alcohol sponsorship are entirely real. These images portray alcohol products in an attractive way. Indeed, that's the whole idea of my talk, but me using them is in no way intended as an endorsement of these brands. So to understand the significance of alcohol sponsorship in sport, we first need to appreciate just how broad and sophisticated these partnerships have become. At its core, alcohol sports sponsorship involves alcohol companies providing financial support to teams, leagues, tournaments, athletes, or sporting events in exchange for promotional exposure and brand visibility. But in practice, sponsorship extends far beyond simply placing a logo on a shirt. Today, sponsorship operates as a complex and highly integrated marketing system. Some forms are immediately visible to audiences. Shirt sponsorship, pitchside advertising boards, branding painted directly onto playing surfaces, stadium signage, fan zone activations and exclusive pouring rights that determine which drinks are sold inside venues. Others are woven more subtly into the sporting experience through branded trophies, interview backdrops, limited edition products, merchandise, and increasingly sponsorship extends into digital and social media environments. Alcohol brands frequently appear across official club and tournament channels, while players, managers, and sporting personalities may feature in promotional campaigns. The result is a form of marketing that is immersive, emotionally resonant, and difficult to separate from the wider culture and identity of sport itself. And the purpose of alcohol sports sponsorship extends far beyond promoting a particular product or increasing short-term sales. Its real power lies in its ability to embed alcohol brands within the emotions, rituals, and identities that make sport so culturally significant. Through sponsorship, alcohol becomes associated with excitement, passion, loyalty, celebration, friendship, and at times even national pride and belonging. Alcohol branding becomes woven into the sporting experience itself, rather than existing alongside it. And this is what makes sponsorship fundamentally different from conventional advertising. Fans are not simply observing a standalone advert during a commercial break. They are encountering alcohol branding during moments of genuine emotional intensity, a last-minute winning goal, a championship celebration, a fierce local rivalry, or a shared national sporting moment. And these repeated pairings create powerful emotional and cultural associations that can, over time, normalize alcohol as an expected and unquestioned part of sport, fandom, and social connection. So today I would like to focus on the research evidence on alcohol sports sponsorship and explore what we actually know about the scale, impact, and consequences of alcohol sponsorship in sport. There is now a large and rapidly growing international evidence space examining alcohol sports sponsorship and its public health implications. Over the past 15 to 20 years, research in countries including the UK, Australia, New Zealand, Ireland, and Canada has moved this issue from being viewed primarily as a commercial or sporting concern to being recognised as an important population health issue. And what is particularly striking is how consistent many of these findings have become across different countries and sporting contexts. So let me begin by examining the scale and nature of alcohol sponsorship in sport, what this sponsorship actually looks like in practice, and just how widespread it has become across modern sporting environments. At the University of Stirling, we have conducted a programme of research exploring the visibility and reach of alcohol sponsorship across a range of sports and media settings. And one of the clearest findings from this work is that alcohol sponsorship is not confined to a few logos or isolated adverts. Instead, it operates as a highly integrated and pervasive marketing system, woven throughout the entire sporting experience. Alcohol branding now appears across almost every aspect of sport, as we saw in my earlier slide. Importantly, many of these forms of sponsorship are embedded directly within live sporting events and broadcasts, rather than appearing as separate advertisements. In some cases, audiences are exposed to alcohol references almost continuously throughout matches. For example, in our analysis of the Six Nations rugby tournament, viewers encountered an alcohol marketing reference approximately once every 15 seconds during live broadcasts. And in Scottish Premier League football, alcohol references appeared around once every 98 seconds. And these references included pitchside branding, stadium signage, sponsorship logos integrated into broadcasts, branded graphics, and other forms of embedded marketing, visible throughout the game. Our research also shows that sponsorship strategies have become increasingly sophisticated over time. Sponsorship is no longer just about visibility, it is about embedding brands within sporting culture, emotional experiences, and fan identities. Our work looking at sponsorship across various European countries emphasised the global and transnational nature of alcohol sponsorship. Of the 178 teams we audited, 72% had at least one main sponsor or partner related to alcohol. So let's now move beyond simply documenting how much alcohol sponsorship exists and focus instead on how people actually experience it. So in other words, what are the mechanisms of exposure? How does alcohol branding become so visible, memorable, and normalised within sport? What the evidence shows is that exposure to alcohol sponsorship is not generated through one single advert or sponsorship deal. Instead, it operates through a network of overlapping and highly integrated channels that surround audiences before, during, and after sporting events. One of the most powerful mechanisms of exposure is live televised sport. Broadcasts repeatedly expose viewers to alcohol branding embedded throughout the match coverage. And importantly, these exposures are continuous and cumulative, often occurring hundreds of times during a single event. Sporting venues themselves are another major source of exposure. Studies consistently identify alcohol branding throughout stadiums and arenas. What makes these essential is that the branding is immersive and difficult to avoid. Alcohol sponsorship becomes embedded within the atmosphere, rituals, and emotional intensity of attending live sport, shaping not only what people see, but how they experience sport as a social and cultural event. In our Foul Play study, which focused on the alcohol marketing at the Euro 2016 football tournament, we identified extensive and repeated alcohol marketing throughout broadcasts of matches, demonstrating how exposure operates through multiple interconnected mechanisms rather than through isolated advertisements alone. Alcohol branding appeared continuously within the stadium and wider tournament. As matches moved between live play, replays, commentary, crowd shots, and post-match analysis, alcohol branding remained persistently visible in the background, creating a highly saturated marketing environment for viewers. Fans encountered branding not only while watching the football, but also while engaging with surrounding media coverage, social media content, and public fan experiences linked to the competition. So this meant that alcohol marketing became integrated into moments of excitement and collective fandom, making the sponsorship feel less like traditional advertising and more like a natural part of the event. And likewise, a study by Murray et al. Demonstrated the enormous scale of this exposure by estimating that alcohol-related branding during UEFA Euro 2016 generated billions of visual impressions globally, including substantial exposure among children and young people. Studies increasingly highlight digital and social media as some of the most powerful mechanisms of exposure to alcohol sponsorship in sport. Today, the sporting experience no longer begins and ends with the final whistle. Fans engage with teams, players, tournaments, and sporting personalities constantly through Instagram, TikTok, X, YouTube, podcasts, live streams, and fan channels, creating an always-on environment in which alcohol branding can circulate continuously across platforms and audiences. And what makes this particularly significant is that the marketing is often subtle, interactive, and highly shareable. Alcohol brands are embedded within memes, highlight clips, competitions, behind-the-scenes footage, and fan engagement campaigns that blur the boundaries between advertising, entertainment, and fandom. Younger audiences are especially immersed in these digital spaces, meaning they may encounter alcohol branding not as a traditional advert, but as part of the online sporting culture they consume every day. Another important finding across the literature is that alcohol sponsorship rarely promotes alcohol alone. It promotes a set of powerful cultural meanings and identities. Alcohol brands position themselves not simply as commercial advertisers, but as part of the emotional and cultural fabric of sport itself. And we can see this very clearly in Scotland, where brands such as Tennent's, which is a Scottish lager brand, have long presented themselves as loyal supporters of Scottish football and national sporting culture. But these strategies are not unique to the UK. Our research in Uganda demonstrated that similar approaches are being used internationally by multinational alcohol companies, seeking to embed themselves within local sporting cultures and identities. In Uganda, alcohol sponsorship was often framed as essential to the survival and development of the sport itself.
É essencial o desenvolvimento do esporte em si. Os patrocínios não se apresentam somente como marketing, mas como jeito de...
And this creates a narrative that without the alcohol industry funding, many sporting activities would struggle to exist. And that can make regulation or criticism more politically and culturally difficult. So bringing this evidence together, several clear conclusions emerge. First, alcohol sponsorship is not confined to elite professional sport. It is pervasive across the entire sporting landscape. For many fans, players and communities, alcohol branding has become a routine and highly visible part of the sporting environment. Secondly, sponsorship now operates across multiple interconnected marketing channels simultaneously. Audiences encounter alcohol branding not only in stadiums and broadcasts, but also across social media and online interactions. This creates a constant and cumulative exposure environment that extends far beyond the match itself. Third, the evidence suggests that alcohol branding has become culturally embedded within sport. Sponsorship is linked to celebration, identity, loyalty, fandom, and social belonging, making alcohol feel like a normal and expected part of sporting culture. Importantly, the sponsorship also reaches children and young people. And finally, many contemporary sponsorship practices are indirect, integrated, and highly adaptable. This makes them increasingly difficult to regulate using traditional advertising controls. But at this point, you might reasonably ask, does any of this actually matter? Is alcohol sponsorship simply background branding that people ignore, or does it genuinely shape attitudes, behaviours, and ultimately health? And that question sits at the heart of this debate, because if sponsorship merely increased brand visibility, its public health significance might be limited. But the growing body of evidence suggests something much more powerful, that alcohol sponsorship influences how people think about drinking, how alcohol becomes woven into social culture, and how these repeated exposures can shape behaviours over time, particularly among children and young people. The evidence increasingly suggests that alcohol sponsorship is not passive background branding. It actively shapes how people think and feel about alcohol, sport, and drinking culture. Across a large body of international research, exposure to alcohol sponsorship has been linked to higher brand awareness, more positive attitudes towards alcohol companies and products, and stronger associations between alcohol and sport. And in some studies, exposure is also associated with earlier drinking initiation, increased alcohol consumption, and riskier drinking behaviours, particularly among children and young people. One of the most important findings is that sponsorship helps normalise alcohol within sporting culture. When alcohol branding is constantly present during matches, celebrations, tournaments, and fan experiences, drinking can begin to feel like a natural and expected part of the sport itself. Over time, this can reduce critical awareness of marketing and strengthen the perception that alcohol belongs within sporting identity. The evidence also suggests that sponsorship influences how audiences perceive alcohol companies themselves. Through partnerships with beloved teams, athletes, and national sporting events, alcohol brands can position themselves as supporters of communities, culture, and sporting success, rather than simply commercial actors selling a harmful product. This can generate trust, goodwill, and emotional attachment that traditional advertising may struggle to achieve. We have recently conducted focus group research with children and young people aged 11 to 17 in Scotland to explore how they understand and experience alcohol sports sponsorship. What was striking is just how familiar many participants were with alcohol brands linked to sport, with young people often able to recall sponsors, logos, and partnerships with ease, These findings closely mirror the wider international evidence showing that sponsorship exposure increases alcohol brand recognition and recall, including among children and adolescents who are below the legal drinking age. A particularly important theme emerging from both our research and the wider literature is the role sponsorship plays in normalizing alcohol within sporting culture. Many young people described alcohol sponsorship as something that simply has always been in sport. In this way, sponsorship can reinforce the perception that drinking is naturally connected to sporting participation and fandom. And if we look at some of the quotes from our own research, we can see these ideas very clearly. Many participants spoke about sponsorship making alcohol feel normal, expected, and closely tied to the sporting experience. Several also felt that sponsorship can influence young people's attitudes towards drinking. This work has now led to 2 academic papers, one which is already published and another which is currently under review. Importantly, one of the strongest themes emerging from our research was the tension between the healthy image of sport and the promotion of alcohol products. Many young people recognise this contradiction immediately. On the one hand, sport is associated with fitness, performance, well-being and health. On the other, alcohol sponsorship is everywhere. It's on shirts, in stadiums, across broadcasts and throughout social media. And what was particularly striking was that young people often held 2 views at the same time. Many questioned whether alcohol really belonged in sport, yet they also described sponsorship as something completely normal and expected, especially in professional football and rugby. Because alcohol branding appears so frequently across these sporting environments, these associations can start to feel natural and routine. For many young people, alcohol and sport have become culturally intertwined. This reflects a much wider body of international evidence showing that alcohol sponsorship has important public health implications. Sponsorship does not simply advertise products, it helps shape social norms around drinking, influencing what feels acceptable, desirable, and culturally connected to sport and social life. This is particularly important during childhood and adolescence, when attitudes, identities, and future behaviours are still developing. A more recent and rapidly growing development in sports sponsorship has been the rise of no and low alcohol products, often referred to as NOLO sponsorship. At first glance, this might appear to represent a positive shift away from traditional alcohol marketing, but emerging research suggests the picture is far more complicated. Across multiple sports and countries, alcohol companies are increasingly using NOLO products as indirect forms of alcohol promotion. These sponsorships allow companies to maintain visibility, preserve brand recognition, and continue associating themselves with sport, even in settings where alcohol advertising may face restrictions. In many cases, the branding of alcohol products, NOLO alcohol products, closely mirrors the parent alcohol brand through the use of the same colours, logos, fonts, and imagery. As a result, the sponsorship may still reinforce awareness and familiarity with the main alcohol product. We explored this issue directly in our own focus group research with children and young people in Scotland. Participants were shown a series of images featuring NOLO sponsorship linked to major alcohol brands. And what was striking was that many young people did not initially recognise these adverts as being any different from the alcohol sponsorship they were already familiar with. In most cases, it was only after prompting from the researcher that participants realised the products were alcohol-free or low-alcohol variants. Several commented that the NOLO branding looked almost identical to the regular strength versions. Another increasingly important strategy in sports sponsorship is alibi marketing, where alcohol companies use distinctive brand elements, such as colours, fonts, slogans, symbols, or visual styles, instead of displaying the alcohol brand name directly. The aim is to trigger instant brand recognition without explicitly showing the product itself. Research suggests that these subtle branding cues can be highly effective, even without showing the alcohol product or logo directly. We explored this in our focus group research. Participants were shown examples of alibi marketing to see whether they could identify the companies, and the findings were striking. Without any prompting, participants across all age groups, including the youngest, immediately recognised Heineken from its distinctive red and green colour scheme, and also recognised Guinness branding from an example using the word greatness. When they were asked why companies might use this sort of marketing, several suggested it could be used as a way of getting around existing restrictions. So given all of this evidence, what policy options are actually open to policymakers? And perhaps more importantly, are current regulatory systems really capable of protecting children and young people from exposure to alcohol sponsorship in sport? A major theme running throughout the research literature is that existing approaches are widely viewed as insufficient. Across multiple studies, researchers highlight significant weaknesses in current systems of self-regulation, partial restrictions, and narrow definitions of what counts as alcohol marketing. Many regulations were designed for a much older advertising landscape, one which focused on traditional adverbs, and struggled to address the highly integrated, cross-platform and indirect sponsorship strategies used today. Critics argue that industry-led regulatory frameworks often prioritize commercial interests over public health protection. In practice, self-regulation tends to rely heavily on voluntary compliance, limited enforcement powers, and broad interpretations of what constitutes acceptable marketing. As a result, substantial exposure to alcohol branding, including among children and young people, continues despite the existence of regulatory codes. Evidence from countries with strong legal restrictions suggests that statutory controls can reduce the visibility of alcohol marketing, although studies also show that loopholes remain a major challenge. Where restrictions focus only on direct advertising, companies may shift towards surrogate branding with no-low sponsorship, alibi marketing, and other indirect promotional techniques. At the same time, digital and social media marketing presents growing challenges because sponsorship content can spread rapidly across platforms that are difficult to monitor or regulate effectively. So in conclusion, alcohol sponsorship in sport is widespread, highly visible, and delivered through multiple integrated marketing channels. The strongest evidence supports effects on brand awareness, recall, and normalization, while evidence for direct behavioural impact is more mixed. Nonetheless, substantial concern exists regarding youth exposure and the alignment of sponsorship with wider public health goals. The literature increasingly points towards reform of current regulatory approaches, with phased restrictions and alternative sponsorship models emerging as commonly proposed solutions. Thank you for listening, and I do hope you enjoyed the rest of this event. Hello, everyone.
Bueno, muchas gracias al Dr. Richard Purves por
Thank
esta
you very
presentación.
much, Dr. Richard Purves, for his presentation that leaves us very important messages on the sponsorship of alcohol in sports, which is not only a commercial strategy, but marketing style that is deeply integrated in sports culture, emotions, and collective emotions. It also reminds us that boys, girls, and young populations are cumulatively exposed to these kinds of messages in stadiums, and on the field side, and in the digital media. And perhaps also relevant now, these strategies have a move to indirect marketing that are difficult to identify and regulate. And precisely concerning these challenges, regulatory challenges, cultural and public health challenges, we will continue with our conversation with the panel. And also, considering that Angelica Maria has already ran her presentation, I think it is also important to learn about some actions and strategies where progress has been made throughout the region. Therefore, we will now have the opportunity of listening to a country experience that's Costa Rica that focuses on the challenges and the progress to protect sport from alcohol sponsorship. Initially, we will have Natalia Chavez, who is chair of the Commission for the Alcohol Beverages Regulation Commission of Costa Rica. Welcome, Natalia. Good morning. It is a pleasure to join you in this very interesting webinar, and that is addresses a very important issue. As Leonardo just mentioned, I'm connecting my camera. As Leonardo just said, I will be discussing a country perspective at the Alcohol Commission in Costa Rica. Leonardo, can you perhaps help me with the presentation, or should I run the presentation myself? Any which way you want. Okay, if you will do it, please, I would appreciate that. Okay.
Adelante, Natalia.
Perfecto, muchísimas gracias.
Over to you, Natalia. Thank you very much. As Leonardo just mentioned, I chair the Commission for the Regulation and Control of Alcoholic Content Beverages Advertising, and I'm also head of the Communications Strategy at the Ministry of Health of Costa Rica. It is important to take into account that our Commission plays a very important role in regulating the commercialization and marketing of liquors, and by enforcing the regulation, that's Law 1947 and Executive Order 3759 from February. To make this law operative, a regulation was passed for control and regulation and established created the commission. This is a brief introduction to the members of the commission. That's three head representatives and their corresponding substitutes. We are all Ministry of Health officials chosen by the ministry. We filled this position for 2 years, but there's always the possibility of a re-election. I was a substitute, now I'm the main chair, and this is the integration proposal together with Daniela, Rosalina, Carol, and Monica. Each of them, as I said, mentioned, is the head representative and their substitutes. And this is part of the obligations of the commission that has to meet twice weekly. And obviously, as there are some times when somebody goes on vacation or is on a sick leave, we have to have a substitute so that our work will not be affected or interrupted, and the work of the commission will not be negatively impacted. And what does the commission do? We review and approve and monitor commercial advertising on alcoholic beverages. It is important to take into account that we regulate exclusively beverages with alcohol content. Because why do I mention this? Because we are also exposed to the content of alcohol in desserts, in candies, and other types of foods, including meals that are the recipes of which are advertised using alcohol. The commission focuses only on regulating advertising of beverages with alcohol content. We approve this type of advertising, but there are also appeals. Generally, typically, we have tried to sensitize, create awareness in the industry, and we have carried out sensitization campaigns, because this is a very mechanical, hard task in what we might call the entire structure, because we get a lot of material that we get and how we review it. And as I said, the commission meets twice weekly, and typically we also have to have special meetings because of the amount of material that we get for review. The commission sits at the Institutional and Marketing Unit, that is previous name of the Communications Unit. That was the name has not been officially changed yet, but we do have a minutes book recording all our sessions, and we have to make a decision within a month about the materials that we are sent, that's a calendar month, but just now in April, we faced a very big workload, and we were responding like in a 3 days deadline for review. However, there were some ups and downs that we will be discussing in a moment. The materials, the decisions can be appealed according to the Hills law. There have been some appeals. We review those appeals, and we try and reach some sort of agreement. Obviously, the Commission is basically interested in protecting the people's health, but we will never place at risk our main objective by any of our decisions. And this is the presentation of an advert as established in the regulations. The company have to fill a form, and they have to attach the materials and deliver to the customer care office. However, during the COVID pandemic, a ministry decision allows the materials to be sent by mail together with the filled out form. The company's representative authorization. The materials may be video clips, designs for the social media. There are all kinds of advertising that we are sent. Now, when the regulations was passed, previously we talked only about the flat media, radio and TV. Because of the growth of the social media, we had to include in the executive ministry order the social media, and in theory, we have to review all materials that is published in the social media published by the industry. What do we regulate? What do we review? In the first place, that all advertisements will not induce to mistake or deception. But there are specific issues, like, for instance, when the beverage in the advert relates the moral, intellectual capacities or abilities of a person. What does this mean? It means that they might induce you to drink, or you will be made a more beautiful person, or if you drink X amount of alcohol beverages, alcohol will help you to concentrate better. And because, believe it or not, we have seen that happen. And likewise, when there is a connection with celebrities, these are issues because these are persons who have minors who are their followers, and therefore they set a sort of an example. Another topic that we regulate is images or sounds related to the moment when alcoholic beverages are ingested, because we know that sounds has creates a lot of emotions that lead to the intake of alcohol. So when it comes to radio messages, we have to be particularly careful, despite the fact that they are less frequent, so that sounds are not included. Like when alcohol is being ingested, the picture, image cannot be close to the glass, but it must be made clear that the person is not drinking the drink. Also, when there is relationship with celebrities, academics, sports persons, or people with special abilities, what we aim at is to prevent that from happening yet because of the social media. Sometimes there are content creators from the rural areas that might create contents and that we cannot include in our scope regarding the social media, because in this digital area that we are living in are a great tool, but they are also an obstacle, because controlling the entire digital sphere for just the six of us, and because of the very heavy operational load, becomes particularly heavy when engaging in this kind of task. This is something that we are trying to pay particular attention to. Another topic is when advertising proposes some therapeutic properties or recommendations, because we here talk about a responsible consumption, but it very often happens, as Ana Maria just mentioned, they want to score a goal by talking about a responsible consumption. So if you're going to be drinking beer, you can drink 6 glasses of water, or take sufficient food, but we forbid this because they are not authorized to provide this kind of recommendations, nor do we allow the use of national icons or folk music. We have rejected a lot of advertising because they use the country flag or the folk music, and in Costa Rica there are many national celebrations like the Holy Cross or the Barbaria that are very typical, that the industry in these opportunities try through music and other components of these celebrations to create some sort of advertising, promote some sort of advertising. And when the advert is directed to minors, that's another no-go. This is something that has been happening particularly in the last year, and that has increased in the last year because we had to make a call to industry, because a lot of cartoons were being used, and not like the ones that we are used to, like Mickey Mouse or those kinds of comics, but they did start to use this kind of advertising to an increasing degree that we had to stop, and we had to talk to the industry. However, they still send these types of advertisements, and perhaps in the expectation that we will eventually drop our guard. But this is something that we're particularly careful with, because they address to children and minors. And likewise, when they use voices or images of minors that are totally banned, and not even the presence of a minor at a eating setting, or like for instance in Christmas, when the whole family is shown and the children are shown with their back to the camera. That is totally forbidden. Also, we forbid publicity in spaces that are directed at minors near schools, churches, public areas, never less than 100 meters away from these areas. Every year we get about 12,000 products, which means that every month we have to review like 1,200 products that we have to review. And this review is a very heavy job for the Commission, and it's particularly complex because we still do not have this process that's been totally digitized. So the people in the Commission the members of the commission have to devote about 3 full days to the commission's work, and yet we still lack the muscle we would like to have to reach everywhere, because the Ministry of Health in Costa Rica has 9 regional departments and 8 local departments. But in our commission, we only have 3 members. So to be able to train all these departments and units so that we can regulate advertising, including in the shops near homes in rural areas, but we do not have sufficient resources. Likewise, when it comes to the social media, we find a lot of advertising that is not authorized, and it's been particularly difficult to download or remove it and to go through the process in Meta to remove those ads. That's been a lot of work, and it's very important that I mentioned now that we have just changed on May 11th our new minister, and the commission has been strongly supported by Dr. Alexander Sanchez Cao, our new minister, who has strengthened the Works Commission in this respect. And there was some time when, say in April last year, in April, some officials had not yet been appointed, and that for some time those positions were vacant, so that prevented us from doing our job, because the commission was not fully staffed. Natalia, thank you very much for your presentation. I think this has been a fabulous experience for our region, so that if we have a complement to your presentation, we would like now to invite Dr. Nidia Amador, who is a medical surgeon with a master in public health and technology, and she currently chairs the National Anti-Tobacco League of Costa Rica and chairs the Healthy Costa Rica Association that addresses non-communicable diseases.
Voy a acelerar un poquito más. Vamos a contar un poquito la experiencia de nuestra organización.
I'm going to discuss with you right now our experience in our organization, and a disclaimer is that we do not have any conflict of interest. Costa Rica Saludable
prácticamente lo que hacemos es promoción de políticas.
And what we do is to promote robust public policies and for the benefit of the whole population, especially for improving the health of our population, because this is one of our endeavors. Costa Rica has done some studies, and we have seen that there is a prevalence of alcohol consumptions among youngsters from 17 to 20. And what Natalia was saying is we do have regulations that what it does is to set, well, the law provides the power and the limits and the boundaries, and in this sense, it's the same thing that Natalia said. I will go into Article 12 of that law, because this is the one that is most contested. And well, Natalia says that this is applied to previous control, and for example, it really prohibits advertising on public buses or transport means. And there is a special protection of minors because there is a prohibition during recreational activities for minors. So this thread about Article 12, I can tell you what has taken place. There was a proposal about the sponsoring of national sports, and we were able to appeal to the court, and the courts gave us, agreed with us, and because this violated Article 25 of the American, the Latin American laws for minors, and we now have two new law proposals, and although the technical committee of the parliament said that although this was an issue already solved because it went against the common law of the national authorities, and but one of the deputies called me, one of the members of parliament, saying that we should go over the articles of this proposal because in order to find out how we could stop it. But it was approved by the Judicial Committee, and at the first debate, but however, at the first debate, we can again oppose it, because we want to oppose propaganda for the major sports leagues on the T-shirts, etc. And in order to, however, go over these attempts against the Constitution, but the judiciary gave us, went in our favor because they said that this type of economic support went against the public health and the comprehensive protection of children. And which are the next steps? Well, the non-approval of this project by the parliament, this is the parliament's rejection of this proposal, is very important. But we also have to strengthen the monitoring of digital advertising, and we could institutionalize all these controls and vigilance in all areas of the country. And we as a civil society, we have seen a popular TV figure promoting alcohol in a public bar, in a public tavern. And we have to increase our efforts to see the real impact of marketing on the youngsters, on minors in Costa Rica. And our legislation should comply with the standards to protect health and not the commercial interests of the industry. And we do have a solid legal framework with a law and regulations that are the pillars for protecting youngsters, teenagers, minors against this kind of propaganda, because these are direct threats for public health. And we also have a robust jurisprudence in our country. And the Constitutional Court said that we had to protect minors from this kind of threat. And the data, the statistical data show that youngsters are still consuming alcohol, and we need a higher degree of state control, not only of advertising. We need to continue regulating and and also improving the controls of the Ministry of Health. Thank you very much for your attention, and we thank you for the space given to us as civil society, because we are linked to, we are together with the Ministry of Health in order to protect the health of children and adolescents in Costa Rica. Thank you for sharing this important experience in the region. And in order to finish with this program, we will have a dialogue in a panel with Fiona Bull. Dr. Bull is a very well-known leader for the prevention of non-transmissible diseases and the promotion of physical activity and sport and intersectoral policies. Welcome, Dr. Fiona.
Thank you very much indeed, and a very good evening, good morning, and good afternoon to you all. I'm joining you from WHO headquarters, and I work in the areas of physical activity, the promotion of physical activity for all of the health benefits, and indeed share the agenda today in reducing and eliminating the harms from alcohol. And these are joined by the topic of today's webinar. I want to extend my thanks to the wonderful presentations we've had. It's been really rich coverage of the topic. Let's take a moment just to reflect. We had an opening presentation by Raul, who presented the data on the importance of this issue in the regional report. And I certainly noted some of those statistics about the high levels, second highest region, but also the consumption by minors and many other details. And we can access that report online. We heard then from Richard with the an extensive presentation about the very topic of where sport and alcohol sponsorship combine, the scale and nature, the agenda of industry to make an immersive experience. We then heard combined from Costa Rica around the work at the regulatory level and how complex and demanding that is from Natalia, and just now from Nydia about the role of civil society and this change and opportunity around the threat to an existing law. And we also heard, of course, from Angelica around the imminent World Cup 2026 and the unfolding examples, real time, of what's happening in 3 countries hosting games. We could have many, many questions. We have around 15 minutes, I believe, and I know the organisers will jump in when time needs. But the topic opens up issues to do with the digital space, the ethical, the governance, the financing of sport, and particularly the tools that we're using to counteract this. And I note from the questions, some people are asking, how did we get here? How did we get to this being so extensive, so sophisticated, so embedded and immersive, to use the words that Richard shared with us? And I want to draw on one of the first questions to ask, given that we know the extensive harms of alcohol associated with alcohol, and we see where we are, the question is, what are we going to do about it? And I want to pick up on this regulatory frame. And Richard said that the current legislations were designed for a different era. And so I'd like to turn to Angelica, first of all, as you're there from Movendi. Can you share with us and comment? I mean, what do you think are the immediate focus areas that we must work on? We're seeing what will it perhaps is too late for this World Cup, but I'd like you to join me there, Angelica, and tell me what are your top two things you'd like to see changed as soon as possible?
No es demasiado tarde, de hecho, como lo dije en el cierre de
Well,
mi
it's too late.
presentación,
As I said at the closure of my presentation, is having this webinar today and the conversation that is led by PAHO is something positive that we should be celebrating. And one thing that we see on the chat and the comments is that we have to do it, but why is it not done? And I believe that something that is a key issue is that it's still very normal to have support of the alcohol industry for sport. It's very difficult to convince our mayors, our governors, our presidents, that the use of alcohol is somehow linked to sports. This doesn't happen with tobacco, but with alcohol, it's evident. And so we have to monitor and document and expose the alcohol industry because this helps us to understand what they are doing. And I invite you to look at the page bigalcohol.expose, and there you can read what we have already documented, but also we can see other things that are happening in your countries and communities. So it's to monitor, to expose, and propose. So we have to work with the government and civil society and also the academia because they oftentimes want to do things, but they believe that they are alone. They think that there is no evidence that the society doesn't support them, but that's not true because, parents are worried about their children. So please go into your navigator and look at the measures that have to be taken. They have to be comprehensive and complete. And we have to, we shouldn't allow the publicity of alcohol also with regard to people that are affected by it and by the habit of drinking alcohol. So we have a framework agreement for the control of tobacco, but we should also apply the same thing to alcohol so that we can go forward to global restrictions. Because speaking about social networks, etc., this is not enough to protect our society.
Well, thank you. And as you say, it may be too late for this World Cup, but if we don't start now in shifting and impacting, we will see it in future games and indeed down to the community level. And in fact, there's a question that's asking about how it's so pervasive that it's now even in local school and community sport becoming, as the industry wishes, normalizing this association between sport and health. You point to many issues there. Firstly, go to your website to get the framework. You did mention that it's not like tobacco, but there was a day when tobacco was embedded in sport. So there's much to learn, including how we get alcohol out of sport. And so I'm going to challenge you to identify the one thing you'd like to happen next. Okay, Angelica. So you think about that, because I'd like to go to Nydia. You've presented a really opportunity here with your current debate. You clearly want to have that the changes rejected. That's correct, isn't it? You want to maintain your the legislation that does prohibit this. What do you need to help? What's needed in Costa Rica to ensure that that could be rejected? The changes would be rejected to preserve this important legislation. Nydia.
Bueno, gracias. Sí, una cosa muy importante es tenemos que normalizar el consumo con estrategias de comunicación. ¿Por qué? Porque la vez pasada que estábamos nosotros como Costa Rica Saludable oponiéndonos a que se quitara ese artículo 12, nos trataban de moralistas, nos trataban, comparaban, por ejemplo, por qué razón en otros países, sobre todo en México, y si lo hacen y por qué nosotros no. Entonces, yo creo que es muy importante eso. Y yo creo que una cosa muy importante es que el IAFA pudiera, IAFA, que es el Instituto de Farmacología pudiera hacer estudios locales. La industria siempre dice, ay, esos son otros países, pero en Costa Rica nos ha pasado con tabaco.
Thank you, gracias. I have lost the translation, so I'm going to hope that the audience here, and we've had an enormous audience.
I'm sorry.
That's okay. I won't repeat because we need to move on to time. So thank you for your answer to the first question there, Nydia. And I'll understand that the audience got this. One of the questions I'd like to ask both panelists is this difficulty that sport will say that they need the funding from the sponsorship, and therefore removal of the sponsorship, which may well be the end game that we all want, banning, prohibiting, removal of all forms. But they'll say the sponsorship money brings funding to sport. And I wonder whether Angelica, you could comment on this. Can you tell us how Movendi and yourselves respond? What are the arguments, as brief as possible, but what would you say we should say to that?
Cuando en Colombia se implementó
in Colombia, we implemented a law that totally prohibits promotion of tobacco products, the advertising of tobacco. So this stopped the advertising of tobacco, but it didn't stop the alcohol. So the arguments of the industry have no basis, and it's much more important to protect the population, to protect teenagers from the messages of the liquor industry, and we need to stop the financing and the facilities for alcohol products. For example, we could tax alcohol products, and this could promote physical activity.
Indeed. I agree with you, and congratulations with this legislation. Nydia, would you like to respond to what you would reply to reinforce the importance, so we can share that, and these can be arguments that start and advance conversations in other countries in the region and in other regions who've joined us in this webinar? Nydia.
Yo creo que es muy importante.
I believe it's very important to educate the legislator, because the industry convinces them that they should allow them to promote sport, because this law initiative that we were able to fight against, we told the legislature, how are you allowing the financing of sports by a very dangerous product? And I believe that they understood that. And something very important, those who wanted that law were the big sports clubs of Costa Rica, but this money would not reach the persons that do sports.
That is a controversial issue, isn't it? That money is going into the sport, but it may or may not, in fact, actually be reaching the local community levels. In other words, there's a contradiction in this which needs to be exposed. Nydia, you mentioned educating the regulators, the decision makers. This is very tangible that many of us could do. And I want to again go back to ask about the level of evidence. It's come through. Richard introduced evidence, but are there evidence gaps? What do we need more information on to help our arguments, to help educating the policymakers, the decision makers, and even sport itself? And I'll ask both of you. So, Angelica, what would be your first and most important evidence gap you wish we could fill?
I believe that we do have the evidence, but we have to translate it into common language and send it to decision makers and to the population, because there are articles in science review, in science publications, etc., and this doesn't help. And the second reflection is something that I was looking at during my PhD studies. Well, advertising is an intervention by the alcohol industry to goes against the reduction of alcohol consumption, because they provide more money than the other funding. So we have to translate the evidence we already have, and in the webpage of Novendi, we have a lot of evidence that has already been translated and that you can use for your campaigns.
Yeah, thank you, Angelica. I think you're reminding us of the evidence we have, and a lot of that is in your Movendi website. And Richard also introduced publications. I think it's fair to say that the opportunity, I think speakers have said, to even use this World Cup, to use events to gather more information, to build that information. You also said about communicating it in easier formats, easier to read for our policymakers and decision makers. So there's some real take homes for all of us working in this area. Training and educational materials, forums for discussion, but the materials translated and adapted. Very good. Can I go to you, Nydia, and see if there's any evidence gaps or information that you would say to invite our academics who are listening and participating? What research should they be doing to help you in your work?
¿A quién?
Yeah.
Okay. Yo creo que una cosa muy importante
Well, I believe that a very important thing is that civil society should be a bridge for joining the academia with the legislators. And in Costa Rica, for example, the tobacco law finances 20% of the funds needed by a sports institute. We could do something like that. And academia should not worry about publishing papers, but to provide scientific evidence to make progress in this issue of controlling alcohol consumption.
Yeah, thank you very much. And the important roles of all academia, the role of civil society to bridge, the role of the regulators and government will all need to work together here. This has been an excellent webinar. We have obviously gone over time because of the amount of discussion we could have, and the presentations are rich in detail. And I'd like to hand back the floor to the organizers and thank again Paho for the opportunity to join from here, and thank the speakers for joining me in this short panel discussion. Thank you, Angelica. Thank you, Nydia. And back to you, Rao.
Bueno, pues muchísimas gracias. Yo solo, de verdad,
well, thank you very much. I would like to thank you all for being present today. I also want to thank the PAHO team that helped us to organize all this, and also our friends from the WHO, and also the experts, the panelists, and interpreters that stayed until the end. And thank you a lot, and also to the audience that accompanied us. We find this conversation truly important because we have to mobilize the population to support us. Civil society should be aware of the negative sides of this advertising and support us in this endeavor. So we have put the links, all the important links on our webpage, and also we have all the information to continue with this struggle and to make everybody aware about the need of these control measures. Thank you very much.
Muchas gracias.